Ladies and gentlemen, before we get into it today, I'd like to read from a list that I've compiled that will help describe the automotive decade for which we're talking about. Let's begin. Teddy Ruxpin, the Dukes of Hazzard, Mr. T, Ronald Reagan, Live Aid, Lisa and the Cult Jam, Nintendo, Voltron, Chernobyl, the Space Shuttle Challenger, Joe Montana, Johnson vs. Bird, the Macintosh Computer, Blade Runners, Ghostbusters, the Karate Kid, and a little band called Metallica. Now, we are, of course, talking about the 1980s, and the two baddest cars are right here. Today, for your enjoyment, we have two cars that we are showcasing, both powerhouses of the 1980s. The first, a 1987 Buick Grand National. We also have an 87 GNX. A real GNX, not a clone. This is one of the 547 ever made.
The GNX is really the holy grail of collectability. Any big car collector, you're most likely going to find a GNX in that collection. 547 examples out there. How many are left out of 547 is unknown.
One can't even mention the GNX, a car we have here today, without first bestowing praise on the one that made that car possible, the original Buick Grand National.
The Grand National as a whole is a pretty trick automobile. This is an 87 model, which meant this was 245 horsepower and 355 pound-feet of torque. I don't want to say the car was polarizing, but it had a presence to it. When the car was released, one of the ads was basically, Darth Vader, your car is ready.
The car scene back in the 80s was mostly Mustangs, Camaros, Trans Ams, Monte Carlos, and Grand Nationals. The Grand Nationals were the king of the road though, stealth-wise. They weren't really known as ass kicker until you raced one. And then once you did, you realized what they were.
You've got a car that was basically built on a platform that was formed in 1978 in the shape of the Buick Regal. Big body on frame, family sedan, right? Big doors, nice cush interior, back seat to throw the kids in, and a big old trunk to put your stuff in to go away for the weekend. Then in 1984, something happened. The guys at Buick said, well, we've got this sedan, and we've got this V6 engine, and I heard somewhere that I can put a turbo on it. That's an interesting idea.
Somehow the engineers got together and said, I got this perfect idea, guys. Let's take this car and paint it black. No chrome, everything black. I actually think that the Grand National was a mistake. It shouldn't have been built. It didn't fit anyone's profile. So my take on what Buick engineers were thinking at the time when they produced the Grand National, probably a lot of alcohol.
Back in 1984, this was not a rational car.
So it was like a slap to the whole GM market. And it was a Buick.
So let's go over some details, because I know there are a bunch of differences.
Pretty much what you're looking at here, aside from the tires, from this point of view, is standard Grand National.
It's amazing because you look at the build quality on it, and I hate to say it's somewhat terrible.
Yeah, this is the 80s.
It's pretty terrible.
This is the age of the Rubik's Cube. What's mostly specific are the mufflers.
Well, if you look at the muffler here, on both sides, it looks like somebody took a hammer. And that's factory, right?
That is factory, yeah, right. I've heard that they've actually put the mufflers in vices and crushed them. And you would crush them for clearance for the suspension. As GM went off the shelf, they just took parts that were available.
Sure.
They took mufflers that, I think these came off of 442.
Well, it makes perfect sense because you could see if that was a normal, if they didn't crush it, it wouldn't clear the ladder bar.
By today's standards, you wouldn't take mufflers off the shelf and crush them. You would engineer something. By 80 standard, this was acceptable.
Welcome to the 80s.
You're talking about 200 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. That's pretty great. And then once the car progressed through the years, you had things like the intercooler added onto it. So 0 to 60 in a car like this is around 6 seconds, 6.5 seconds. Now, by today's standards, that's really not that fast. But again, in 1987, these cars were pretty good. Okay, I'm not gonna run the boost up. I'm just gonna put my foot down slowly, boost, 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 back tire spinning, spinning, spinning. Go, 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 go. Okay, like, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's not slow. If we kind of roll onto the power, like, the boost is really fun. And it just, I mean, we're doing 65 miles an hour. The car feels great. Now, handling. See this corner? I'm literally going 45 miles an hour, and this thing understeers like a tugboat. I mean, handling, not really okay. I don't want to go through a handling challenge. If a chicken walks out in front of me, I'm gonna hit it. When in doubt, take him out in this car. It's not even an argument because I ain't swerving. The car it wasn't really made to go around a corner. It was made to just cruise down the open road at 80 miles an hour, like this. And then when some guy in like a Mustang GT came up, you could have been like, how are you? I hate to say this, but I'm gonna put my foot down. Oh, and you're gonna lose. Turbo boost! So this is pretty cool. Not only is this the first time I've ever been behind the wheel of a 1987 Buick GNX, but I actually get to drive it today. And for me, that's huge because I have wanted to drive this car for 30 years. Since this car came out in 1987, it was a bucket list thing, whether to drive one or to own one or to see one. And when you've got such a rare vehicle, where only 547 were ever made, you kind of look at it as a unicorn. If you think a Buick GNX is just a rebranded Buick Grand National, I'm here to tell you, you would be wrong. You see, GNX stands for Grand National Experimental, and when you put your foot down, you can totally see why. So let's talk about some of the differences between the Grand National and between the GNX. Now, 87 was the final year for the Grand National body. And the GNX, well, was the big dog of the bunch. The GNX has everything you would want in the Grand National, plus that extra like 45% of like testosterone. That's what you want in this car. They did kind of go balls out on this car from kind of a development perspective. This car was actually developed in conjunction with ASC and McLaren. McLaren, the guys that built the F1, the guys that built all sorts of supercars today, and the guys that every time somebody says McLaren, they go, oh my God, McLaren's the greatest thing in the world. Yeah, they worked on a Buick back in the day.
Hell yeah, I miss those days. It was great car culture. It was a great time to really drive and be free. Street race dominating. Detroit captured that market and it brought it into car culture and it made it relevant. And the cars were part of it. When you drive, whether it's a Grand National or a GNX or a Mustang or an IROC or a Monte Carlo, it's really bringing you back to a time where things were a little bit simpler.
What a lot of people don't realize is one of the main differences between the GN and the GNX is the ladder bar, the torque arm, right? Yeah, the cool part about a torque arm is that these were pretty trick kind of drag racing pieces back in the day, right? And what the torque arm would do was keep the suspension from compressing. As opposed to compressing, it would actually make the car rise up in the back, put more weight on the rear tire so you would gain grip and shoot forward, as opposed to losing grip.
This is all specific. You have an upper bar, a lower bar, and you have the trailing arm. So all this was specific to the GNX.
These were straight line cars. These were not handling cars. You wouldn't road course these or anything like that. Buick made this car to go as fast as it could in a straight line. And back in 87, it did. I mean, you're talking a 0 to 60 time of about 5 seconds or so. And that's lightning quick for back in the day.
GNX was the top of the line Grand National that they offered in the hardtop version. So it came with everything power.
Under the hood, we basically do have the same 3.8 liter motor, except it has a bigger turbo. Where the Grand National did 15 pounds of boost, this one goes up to 16 pounds of boost. It's like Spinal Tap, turning it up to 11. It's just that little extra bit that pushes you over the edge. It's just a kind of a different car, and it drives differently. It drives completely differently. The Grand National is a sofa. drive the GNX and it is much, much stiffer. The springs are stiffer, the ride quality is stiffer. It does handle better, which means it's still not great, but it handles better. It makes you feel a little more confidence in spotting. In fact, both cars, the Grand National and the GNX, kind of handled like crap. This is a body-on-frame car, and you've got all this motor, so when you hit the gas, it feels like the frame wants to go, and then the body's got to catch up to it, which is kind of an unwieldy feeling in a car. Interior-wise, there are a couple of differences. You do have that GNX plaque up front, and on the dashboard, I have gauges. I have real gauges. I have Stewart Warner gauges. I have a real tach, a real speedometer. I have a turbo boost gauge. I have an oil pressure gauge, a speedometer, and like everything that I could want to make sure that the high performance that I'm experiencing in this car is really there. This car is badass, and I love it. Super fortunate today because my buddy Pete, I want to say thank you because you really, truly did just fulfill one of my childhood dreams, and not many people can say that, so thank you for this.
Before you go, make sure to subscribe now so we can keep you updated on new episodes along with everything that is the House of Muscle.
That worked.